Well. Chairman of the Church Council, how can I top that? Well, I can by having my staff sitting right here in the front seat. If ever anything's meant to be slightly intimidating, surely that is, because they've said twice today, we're coming tonight, it better be good. So thank you all for coming on a night like this in such numbers to listen, above all, to a speech about cockroaches. And as I walked around the hall, as you had your coffee and cake or what, the number of people who came up and told me a cockroach story was from people finding cockroaches under their pillow to people finding cockroaches where they shouldn't have found them, people standing on cockroaches. Why are you so violent? This tiny little insect, and as soon as you see it, you've got to stamp on it. But I want to tell you that the cockroach frequently has an answer to that, because you can stamp on it 4 times and take your foot off it and it runs away. Yeah. So, and I've got to say even further that Dr. Kingsbury arrives here all the way from some distant place carrying, fortunately it's almost empty. I mean, this is horrendous stuff. This would kill human beings, say nothing to cockroaches. Oh, well, there it is. So, I hope that this evening will be something like a symphony of surprises. Surprises. And the surprise started, for me, with my morning cup of coffee or tea a few months ago. And there I was having my coffee, to discover there was something in the bottom of the cup. Halfway through my morning cup of tea, I look and I thought, what is this object in the bottom of my cup? In closer examination, I discover it was a cockroach. And I said to the cockroach, how did you come to be here? Asked for all, did it come out of the kettle? Or was it waiting for me in my cup? Where? And the cockroach had the same question to me. How did you come to be here? And so that's part of my answer tonight. Imagine it. Many times in this place, I wished I could do as the cockroaches all do. Simply quickly disappear through the cracks and it's gone. And I often ask myself, what would have happened had I done that way back? Just disappeared. Or not taken the job in the first place. I might tell you that when it was on the cards for me to come here 45 years ago, there were several people who told me I shouldn't take it, that I wasn't fit for the job. And others were quite surprised that I took it and even stayed a while. So there it was, way back. So when I look at the cockroach, I'm inspired by a cockroach for its toughness, for its durability, and for the fact that it constantly springs surprises. There you are, sitting there quietly, and all of a sudden you turn the page in your book and the cockroach jumps out. You weren't expecting that, were you? And that's what the cockroach says. Here it comes in different situations, just when you're not expecting it. And just over recent months, I've been writing an essay about a cockroach. One of my grandchildren have been writing the essay, of course, on Kafka's Metamorphosis, where poor old Sasma wakes up one morning and finds he's a cockroach. Well, probably it was a parable about what happens to many of us. We can wake up and find we feel like a cockroach. So, in my cup of tea, a surprise appearance. So, never deterred, the cockroach, as soon as you see it, will jump away from you, speed away, and down the most extraordinary, smallest crack in the wall, or underneath the carpet. Even though you put your foot on it, it will disappear through the carpet. The darkest place in the church spire, you'll find a cockroach. But would you believe it? There's the pulpit pillow right up there. And one day I was standing there before morning service and I lifted the pillow and there was a cockroach. And of course the cockroach said, I've been here longer than you have. Cockroaches have a long time to live. So, don't they? They live a long time. And they come in many shapes and sizes and many species. Well, to get to the task before me tonight, I'd like to say that I'll probably repeat myself once or twice, and I'll probably leave out things. So we might get at the end of the time, if I don't talk too long, we might get a chance for you to say, oh, by the way, what about that and that? So here are some of the surprises. One Sunday morning in church, I'm sitting here in church, and sitting right in the front pew was the leader of the International Scholars of the Jesus Seminar, Dr. Funk. I'd never met him before. I'd heard about him, I'd read about him, but here he was sitting here. And he said, I've heard about you and this place, so we've come. And by his presence here, some of you would know, he then invited several of us, 4 or 5 of us, to pay a visit to his place in California at one of their conferences, where they're putting on a conference, as they do, to try and find the historical Jesus. And as a result of that, a book was written. I have it here. Because he invited, at that particular conference, he invited various people from several countries to come there and speak about their experience of the new faith or the historical Jesus as it is demonstrated and spoken about in the church. And so his book that he brought out was The Historical Jesus Goes to Church. And my speech at the symposium is included in this. So, I'll talk about the other books later on. So there's a surprise. Not only that, I'll talk about the lectures we've given in this place, but the whole business of St. Michael's has exploded in recent years, so that what we say on Sunday morning is transmitted out in over 100 countries. Do you think that's extraordinary? I think that's amazing that happens. We've had distinguished preachers, visitors in the pulpit, from Bishop Spong to Ernest Campbell from Riverside in New York, to Malcolm Sinclair from Metropolitan Church in Toronto, to Don Coupert from Cambridge. We've had the Archbishop of Melbourne, way back, not the present one, previous one, the Archbishop of Adelaide, who just might be here tonight, but when he was Archbishop of Adelaide, now is here in Melbourne. We've had the Archbishop of all Scotland. We've had the moderator of the Church of Scotland. We've had Professor Lloyd Gearing from New Zealand. And we've had Professor Ferguson, the Professor of Theology from Edinburgh University. All those and many more. The VIPs have come here to speak. Dr. Rodney Syme, Hugh Mackay was here just last week. I've mentioned Ian George, the Archbishop, was here. Ainsley Mears, Dr. Peter Doherty, the prize winner. What prize is it I'm talking about? The Nobel Prize. Barry Jones, Dr. David Pennington, Julian Burnside, and on they go. Surprise, surprise. At one time we had Dr. R.D. Lang here. He'd been a friend of mine for many years, and he stood here in the pulpit. We had Dr. George Albee, the president of the American Psychological Association, here as my guest. And just a short time ago, we had Lisa Miller from Columbia University here talking about the importance of spirituality in the wider world. Surprise, surprise. So, way back in the piece, I read a little story about people floating down the river, all drowning in the river. And people were pulling them out of the river. And at length one fellow stopped, and he was not going to pull any more out. And they all said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going up the mouth of the river, out the top of the river to see what son of a bitch is putting all these people in the river? And thereby, one of our members seized that very issue and said, we're going to have a continuing seminar called the Up the River Group. How to prevent people falling in the river. How to prevent things from happening. How to prevent suicide. How to prevent mental illness. How to prevent depression. How to prevent whatever came on the agenda. So Max Kidd and his group, way back, put into action the parable of the Up the River in terms of prevention. I draw attention to that first of all because as I unfold the various things that have happened in the 45 years, I do want to emphasise that you could easily conclude that this is just one ego trip for me to tell you what sort of things I did. But let me correct you immediately. None of this could have happened without a vast number of people being involved, not only today in the present church, but in the period, year after year, the numbers of people who have been involved in helping remodel, rebuild, reconstruct, reshape this church. Because right back at the beginning of my time, we were right down to a group of people 1/4 of the size of this gathering here tonight. 1/4 of the size. On the first Easter Sunday morning, we had less than 100 people in church. Compared that with some years later, and we had more than 1,000 people right round to the ashtrays, as we call them, up here behind me, full. Some of you are part of it. Now, in the meantime, over the years, we've had incoming and outgoing tides. People have come and gone. The congregation has grown and receded and grown again and receded again. But we've had surprises again and again. When I have lost my way, we've had music here from various significant, very highly significant musicians, not only from our paid staff, organists and pianists and so on, but from the vast number of professional musicians, from Greta Bradley of recent times, to Evgeny on his French horn, to Bruno on the trumpet, Amir Ferid on the piano, to Distelkampf from Germany on his own voice, showing us what can be done, to various choirs, through from Eltham Primary School to the Australian Girls Choir, and so on. Julie Rains from the Victorian Symphony Orchestra, Judith Dodsworth, I could go on naming them. Sergio Di Pieri from Italy played on this organ. The very piece of music that I heard him play 45 years ago, more than 40, 55 years ago. And as each organist came here, I insisted that they should play one piece of music exactly as he, Sergio, played. And to my great pleasure, just last year, or was it the year before, he appeared here himself in person. And I said, come on down. You come down to the church in the middle of the afternoon and play me the offertorio. And he did. So that's all of that goes on and on. Marvellous music right through the place. Of course, many of you would know that this church was once called the Collins Street Congregational Church, the Collins Street Independent Church. And then at the time of the Union in 1977, it was thought to be a little bit of a peculiarity to have a uniting church called an independent church. I was way overseas at the time, or otherwise I think I would have insisted that they keep the name, because it had a certain peculiarity and uniqueness about it. But they decided, the board at the council at that time decided to change it to the Collins Street Uniting Church. And I lived with that for some time until I told them this is as boring as the Uniting Church itself has become. To call a church the Collins Street Uniting Church. Can we give it a little colour and a little flavour? I had come out of a tradition from the Church of Scotland, where there was great colour and great, would you believe it, Presbyterians with great colour. You wouldn't think it. But within the Church of Scotland, yes, they did have tradition and formality and colour. And I suggested it was time we sort of put something back into our situation. And I then petitioned again and again to find a different name for the church. And eventually I came and suggested we'd call it St Michael's. Understandably, several people said, that sounds pretty Catholic. To which I replied, and what's wrong with being Catholic? Because we're all part of the wide Catholic Church, if you like. So we went backwards and forwards until the moderator of the Church of Scotland came and he said, Michael was a very good saint. So Michael it became, didn't it? And there it was. Surprise, surprise. Who would have thought that could happen? That overnight we could give the church a different name. And for it to stick, as it has done. And not only to stick, but become recognisable right through this city, right through this country, and far beyond. I'd like to mention about the properties. Would you believe it, when I first came here, I wanted to bring a distinguished preacher out from America as a visitor, and I was going to put on an exhibition in the gallery, because the gallery was empty, hadn't been used for 20 years. So the architect at the time, Vivian Taylor, came with me into the gallery to see, could we move the pews away? Could we do something in order to put on an exhibition in the gallery? And as we were doing that, he discovered quite a lot of dust and dirt was along the back wall, only to realise that the front wall of the church had eased out. The front wall of the church was falling out. And he panicked. And didn't we all? And what happened was, we then said, well, we can't put a new wall in. So in came the engineers and put in place two huge metal props from the garden up against the wall outside to hold the wall in place. Did any of you see it? Yeah. It's remained like that for several years until we started to do a different renovation in the church, and I was able to do a little bit of wheeling and dealing to get the people at the time to take the props away and put the front wall back into place, which we did, and the props went. And in the bargain, I also said, and by the way, I want some new windows in the church, stained glass windows, because the windows here on the ground floor all looked like prison cells. They were amber glass with black bars, vertical bars up in them. And I said, do we want to stay with that? Could we not put new windows into this place? Well, as you'd expect, several members of my church council at the time said, no, we should be giving money to other good causes. And I said, that's very good. But will you? Will you do that? I knew they wouldn't. Churches are like that. They say, we should give money over there. We should do that, but they don't. So I said, you won't do it. Fortunately, in the process of doing the big renovation of the church, one of the organisations or companies involved said, we would like to give a donation. Now that we've done so much to restore the church, could we do that? And I said, yes, you could, but I'd like you to name it for the stained glass windows. And that's how the stained glass windows happened. They gave us a large slab of money and earmarked it for the new windows. And that's why you have this whole cycle of stained glass in the bottom. And a year or so later, we put in the miniature stained glass in all the doors around the church as well. So this is part of the properties renewal. The gardens were a disaster, and they looked like it. So we decided along the way to restore or to revamp the gardens. We did so. We've done so. We've done so again and again. And today I think that a marvellous exhibition of what can happen in terms of making a building look as if it's cared for, lived in, colourful, and there's a great presence of quietness about the gardens. Happened. Along the way, talking of properties, we said we'd put in Mingary. I suggested to the congregation and the council that many people were suffering hugely from trauma in this town, in this country. I'd like to put in a sculpture in the place to help people sit for a while and recover their equanimity or their inner harmony. And so we devised, thanks to the architects at the time and also thanks to the sculptor, we devised that Mingary sculpture and its total construction in there. It was all done because it all happened because I read a poem of The Orange Tree by John Shaw Nielsen, the Orange Tree. And one of our members, Elizabeth Green, she may be here, she said, I'd like to take that poem and put it before the congregation and say to them, would you give me an orange for the orange tree? And she constructed an empty orange tree over there, and she said, for everybody who gives me $1,000, I'll hang an orange on the orange tree. We needed 70 oranges. We collected 140. So that's a little bit of what can happen as we decided we're going to rebuild this place. When I came here first, the halls from which you've exited just now were a slum. They'd been allowed to deteriorate further. And they were used, but they're fairly in disrepair. So we started to do a little wheeling and dealing. When it came to the reconstruction, we were able to do a deal with that reconstruction to rebuild our halls. That cost us. Didn't cost us anything, in fact, but we really lost big time because we sold the properties we had at the wrong time, and a year later, those same properties were resold. Oh, and what could I have done with all that money? Right. Thanks to the excitement of some people within the congregation here, they said, we need a grand piano. And so before long, we were collecting money for that grand piano. Superb piece, a superb instrument there. So there's the properties. And what about the people? The people. We were a small bunch of people, and we've grown into a really wide, spread out group of people all over this city, from Wagga Wagga, if you call Wagga Wagga part of the city, right down to the South Pole. We have had people part of this congregation, believing that this was their home church. So in all that, how will we then take the organisation and put it into shape? Right at the very beginning, the church was governed by a group of 10 people. They called it a diaconate. And along with that diaconate, we had 4 or 5 trustees. The interesting thing about the trustees is that they held all the power. They held all the money. And so we were very circumscribed. Worse than that, we were leg roped by those 4 or 5 trustees who never came to church. So they didn't have any idea of what I was trying to do, but they nevertheless controlled all the finances until one critical moment when they had a problem in terms of looking after their financial governance. And so they paid me a visit to my home late at night and said, we want you to persuade the congregation to do this, this and this. And I said, I'll do that on one condition, that you make me a member of the trustees. They had no alternative. It was called an offer they couldn't refuse. And they did just that. And from that time on, I was able to, shall we say, reconstruct those trustees by bringing in different trustees. In fact, one by one, they saw that they couldn't coexist with me, and they resigned. And I warmly accepted their resignation because it allowed us to do what we're then able to do and have been able to do. So from 10 people plus 5, we were hamstrung again and again. So with the reconstruction that took place and the growth of the people within the congregation, we were able to rebuild the governing body so that today we have a church council of some 50 people. Now that can be a problem, of course. It's very difficult for a person like me, being at that time the chair of that council, because again, I insisted that I would be the chair of the bodies right through. And so in order to keep everybody happy and cohesive was quite a problem. But we did it. We did it. Thanks to all of them keeping their mind focused. What did William Pitt the Younger say? Remember? He said, the secret of success is singleness of purpose. I reminded them of it again and again. If you start spreading yourself out all over the place trying to do things, then it will fail. But if you keep focused, as we did, we were able to do what we have in fact done. So we moved, you see, from a small group of people to this large governing body. And to do it better, I said we then form within the congregation a number of deaneries. So we appointed 4 and then 5 deaneries. So, and 2 people from the church council would be the deans, dean and deputy dean, looking after various aspects of the congregation. The morning church services, the buildings, the pastoral care programs, the programs generally, and so on. All of those programs had 2 deans on top of them, and they had to then get other people from the congregation to participate in those deaneries, so that each deanery would have perhaps 20, 30, 40 people meeting and serving on that deanery to see that all the aspects of that deanery took shape. So if I take Sunday morning service, a whole lot of things take place in that regard in terms of getting people in the doors, out the church, into the halls, and so on. Many things had to be done. And so if you just leave it to one person, it didn't happen. But if we could get people on the doors, we had people whom I call kelpies running around. Kelpies are little dogs yapping. So we had kelpies running around to make sure people were on duty at the right time, doing their job, ensuring that we can get the visitors recognised, and so on. There it all happened. So from nothing, really, from nothing, we developed this some people might say this cumbersome organisation, but it works. The surprise and the excitement is it works. That those 5 deaneries do a fantastic, that's an F word, they do a fantastic job over these last, how many years? Since they were in operation, probably 30 years since they came into operation. So there it is. In terms, you see, I'm going along the way with a few P's. We could say, what about pastoral care in this congregation? We started a pastoral care program. Originally, it was expected that the priest, the minister, would visit. That was impossible. That was impossible. I had another job as well. I was trying to run this congregation. And in any case, people were scattered, from, as I mentioned, to the 4 winds of the earth, really. So we made sure that pastoral care could work from within the body of the congregation, from within the church council and outwards. And it's done, and its leader sitting right in front of me, it's done a tremendous job to make sure our pastoral care program. I wish that many churches from all across the country could come and see what you folk have done to ensure that our pastoral care program works as it does. Not only is it the congregation and the committee have done it, but through them, the staff have also been active in that program, done a tremendous job. Really, I mean that seriously. So, there's the pastoral care program. I could just mention, I mentioned it so superficially, the prayer tree, through, it says here to go to 4B in my things. Oh yes, I'll come to that too in a minute. But Surprise, surprise. You see, I can move to the programs, another P. The Ken Miller started right at the beginning. Well, it had been going already, but when I came, the congregation said, we want you to bring Ken Miller with you. That was quite a job. It still is a job, I think, but we did it. And other programs, we started way back in 1971, we started the social justice program, the first social justice program of churches in this country. It's now called the Global Concerns Program. We've started many groups within the congregation, as you see Sunday by Sunday. We started the bigger programs of SAGE for older people, meeting tomorrow, in fact, between the ages of 55 and 105 years of age. We began the Big Tent program for littlies, looking after little kids in the kindergartens right across the state. And those programs have been going for 27 years. Mingri, a tremendous program, I think going 16 years. 16 years, the director of the program is here, and she's done a tremendous job to get that program up and running. Not only is it the Mingri sculpture that's there, which is tremendous, but we found that as soon as we had that in place, many people were coming in there and they said, we need someone to talk to. It's a quiet place. It's a healing place. But we're hurting. We need someone to talk to. Or we've got problems, or we've got stresses. So people across the city have gone into Mingri, and then we started the counselling program. And Lynette here with her team have built up this program, low-cost counselling, taking place here every day, and people from all walks of life, regardless of any religious or commitment or none. We've insisted right along the way that that was not going to be a hindrance any more than having the right amount of money to do it. All right, so from there I go to another P, the pews. You're sitting on very comfortable pews. I've got to tell you, it wasn't always so. I didn't realise how bad they were until I had to sit in one myself. And I thought, this is terrible. Now again, thanks to the architects and people within the congregation, we were able to renovate this whole place. Top to bottom. Top to bottom. The gallery was a mess, and this downstairs part was, from the very beginning, a congregational hazard. We didn't have a central aisle. The pews just went across, right up to here. The organist sat up there. It was a real jumble up to the top here. Incredibly so, and it was difficult to see what was important in the place. So again, the architect of the time, Vivian Taylor, a venerable gentleman of great poise and skill, I called him in and said, this is what I want. I want a central aisle. I want this whole place opened up. I want us to get a proper chancel here. I want us to put various appointments in place, the candles, the cross, and so on, and the baptismal font. I want to have the altar here in place. I want it bolted down to the floor, because in previous days, people would come in and say, we don't need that here, do we? So they chipped it out. Nothing was sacred. Nothing was sacred. And so it all happened like that. So here's what you're seeing, a total reconstruction right through the place. We put new pews in, we put new gallery pews in up there, and so on. All has taken place. Now, I admit, I've put on my page here the pews and the pendulum. The pendulum has swung from being way over there, empty church, to way over here to full church, to way over here to empty church, way back here to half full church. It took us 10 years to move from an empty church. 10 years. And then we started to see growth. And that growth has continued in a fairly stable way, thanks to the publicity we took on. And the publicity was not very costly. We simply put in an inch square advertisement in the Age every Saturday morning. And that was read, over the years, that's been read. It simply said, what was I going to be talking about? And people have come. the publicity, that's another P, the publicity within the St. Michael's, of course, has burgeoned out from that to a lot of other work as well. But it really did start from that 1 inch square, that advertisement. And so people from all walks of life have come here. Religious persuasion and none. It's been, for my part, I think it's been very exciting to find that we can speak here in this place to what we were originally, a very independent place. Good. So, I often wonder why people have come. I wonder why they stay, but they do. Surprise. Surprise that the pews continue to be occupied. Our pastoral care and follow-up, as I said before, have been models, I think, of what can be done. Our morning services have swung from being fairly shallow occasions and irrelevant to being, I hope, engaging, enhancing, and expansive. I hope. Well, I know that has happened. Sometimes it hasn't happened. And I'm more acutely aware, I suppose, than many, when it hasn't happened. From time to time, some have asked, where are the young people? To which I have retorted, where are the old people? We need them too. They need us as well. And I know that we've only touched the iceberg in that regard, that vital tip of the iceberg of gathering large numbers of people, thoughtful, searching people, intelligent, broad-minded people, educated, widely educated people, caring, focused in their search for something. And I'll have more to say about the search in a minute. Those who wanted to hold on to the old, rudderless religion were soon being outnumbered by those who knew intuitively, as well as from a studied reflection, that a new and relevant religion was needed. And so we began the exploration of what I began to call the new faith. And some of you would know that this book was produced to be a statement about the new faith. The new faith, of course, went hand in hand with our conversations with the Jesus Seminar, but it preceded the Jesus Seminar, in fact, and was augmented by their encouragement and their inspiration. But there it was, a surprise, that in fact, when it came to the issue, many people said, well, tell us about it. What is it about? So we started putting big signs up on the freeway. Do you remember? Big signs on the freeway. And one sign in particular caused a ruckus. I thought it was a great sign. And I still think it was. But the Uniting Church powers that be thought that I should be somewhat brought to heel on this. So they said, this is no good. You must take that sign down. And I said, well, we're going to take it down anyway, but it's done its work. Because so many people from different walks of life, different denominations, right through the religious spectrum, in fact, have commented on this particular thing. The church across the road put up an opposing sign, contradicting the sign that we'd put up. And I thought that was marvellous. We don't have any conversations with them, but at last we had a conversation. They read our sign, I was pleased to see, and we read theirs. They were very angry, and we laughed. You've got to laugh, because it was a happy occasion that we were able to do this. So, you see, I had one man who had never been in the church before, but he came one Sunday morning to coffee, and he said, I want to say something. So he said to me, I was driving in on the freeway, and he said, I saw this sign above the freeway. And he said, I said to myself, Jesus Christ. So with such blasphemy, he He put the brakes on, and would you believe it, he turned the car around, went across the freeway and back, and came and had another look. Now, I had several people do something similar. What were we up to? What were we up to? So there it was, you see, that people would, surprise, surprise. When people come to St. Michael's, they get a surprise. I hope they do. Because as soon as they walk in the door, they might just say, oh, we didn't quite expect this. As soon as they become part of what we do here Sunday morning, a strong, carefully worded, planned experience, they say, oh. Now, I happened to attend the funeral yesterday morning, and I thought it was so important to me to be at that funeral, and yet the funeral ceremony itself was such a shambles that I left. I thought, what a pity. If anything would make me leave the church forever, that would. So I wanted to say, I hope that we at St. Michael's have been able to portray a sensible formulation of a meaningful drama of what religion can be. A serious, accessible religion supported by a comprehensive scholarship, engaging, as you know with me anyway, a psychology and a theology, aesthetics, and all that goes with good artwork, all that goes with inspirational appointments. So there we have it. I'm going to another P, the pulpit. The pulpit had to be different, of course. I hope it has been. But I won't pause much longer except to say that as a result, in the flow of the pulpit, several books of sermons, addresses have been written and sold in fairly wide numbers. People from around the world have tuned in to what happens here on Sunday morning via the internet. We've put forward books of prayers, I hope in meaningful language. I know that people have found them so because they bought the books as well as asked me to use the prayers again and again. All part of Sunday morning, the pulpit and the church service. As you know, we've composed our own hymns. We certainly needed to in the light of some of the hymns that are in the hymn book. And we've had a great evolution of musical excellence. If you come here Sunday morning, as many of you do, you know that we have an outstanding director of music. Directors of music are only part of the orchestra, really. I'm the conductor of the orchestra, and so therefore a director of music has to be very much in empathy with the conductor. And in our present situation, we have that in a superb fashion. So we've been able to produce good music, unusual music, without being ridiculous, never. So there it is. What is our posture? Our posture has been to look and say, well, we are part of the uniting church. That has not always been an easy relationship. But we are part of it, and we try very hard to take our part in it, and we do. But sometimes that has its difficulties, both from the central body to us and us to them. We are part of a wider church, the churches in this city, and beyond that, the churches around the world. We did try to take part in the Parliament of Religions. I think that if they'd let us run it, it would have been successful. Instead, they wanted to run it themselves, and in my opinion, it was a failure, which was a great pity, because it could have been successful. Now, in terms of our projection, you see, Sunday morning and generally, who would believe, really, that I could give a lecture on Paul Tillich's theology, a most obscure theologian, German theologian, if ever there's one, and 250 people will turn up for it. Or on Martin Buber, great Jewish philosopher, a person that I've studied intimately for 60 years or more, 250, 70 people turned up for the lecture. When I gave the New Faith lecture, 700 people turned up to it. Extraordinary, when you think of it. Now, we have a number of prized appointments, and I'd like to pause and notice those. Yes, I've had time to do this. Prized appointments. I wanted to draw attention, for example, to the processional staff. I'd like it to be called the People's Processional Staff, because every Sunday morning a member of the congregation carries the processional staff. And within it, if you've heard me speak about it, there are important symbols of what this church is about and what our faith is about. Similarly, I could go to the chalice. Used for the sacrament. Fortunately, someone broke into the church 45 years ago and stole the chalice. Fortunately. Because the chalice wasn't any good anyway. It was an old piece of material that I was pleased to see it gone. But it allowed me to say, let us reshape the chalice. And thanks to Peter Gertler, the silversmith, who's been a great friend of ours, he did the staff as well. He fashioned that magnificent chalice with its jewels within it, with its different symbols around it. There it is. So there's that. And if that wasn't enough in our appointments, remember the stained glass windows right around the bottom? And then in the apertures of the doors right around. The apertures are very different from the big ones. The apertures are meant for you to go up and not only look at them, but touch them. Because the lead work is not only visual, it's sensual. So see them. So there it is. I've mentioned already the gardens, the Mingri sculpture. And now, is the tapestry alight? Do you see the tapestry? We decided we'd put a tapestry in place. I wrote a poem for the tapestry, and the Tapestry Guild came, they did the tapestry. There it is. Our gallery, I'm pointing this way, I should point that way. Our gallery began this year, where it gives our own artists and artists outside the congregation a chance to exhibit their work. And then there are various portraits within this church, upstairs, downstairs, and around the place, which are historic and valuable, and they've been put in place and what's the word I want? Well, they've been regenerated. And the lighting, both outside and inside, all part of the appointments of this church. I should not and do not wish to forget that if you go to the halls, not only will you see the gallery downstairs, but in each room, right through the building, we've named the rooms different names, and there's artwork in each room. We especially planned that way back. So there it is. Another P. We've been to places. As you know, I have, over the years, travelled widely for my work, in my other job, but in this job too. And in travelling widely, I've brought back stories of churches, of people, of places, and then you've gone to them. You might know that the very first year I was in this church, in fact, before I came here, the month before I came, I was looking after a symposium in the Pacific Islands. 11 nations gathered together for a family counselling symposium. And then the World Council of Churches invited me to be the organiser and keynote speaker at that conference, or the trainer at that conference, which not only went to Fiji, it went to Samoa, and other members of my staff went there until I think we ran 4 such programs. And then some of you took to it, and you went to Fiji and Samoa. Others went to India, some went to New Guinea, and so on. I've encouraged many of you to visit Switzerland, where the original idea for our windows was born within me in one of the major churches in Zurich in Switzerland. So there we have it, from Switzerland to Turkey to Germany, so on. And then we became a little more humble. We decided we'd go to Talbot. Do you know where Talbot is? Up in the country. A country visit to Talbot and Maryborough. And then we went to Malagal, the birthplace of John Flynn, of the founder of the Inland, and so on. Surprise, surprise. All throughout the place we've had people doing things. Take, for example, not only did we visit Turkey, Romania and Colombia, but who would ever guess that here in St. Michael's, one Sunday morning at coffee, we'd have a young woman sing to us in Swahili. How extraordinary. She was one of the John Waters Fellows. John Waters was a member of this congregation, he and Gwen, and she, when he died, left arrangements for us to have the John Waters Scholarship to bring out psychologists from various countries that I'd visited. Turkey, Romania, Colombia, South America, Nairobi, and this year from Bhutan. That brings us in touch with a wider world. As these young people come, we have them talk to us, visit us, and tell us a little bit about themselves. And there it was. So there was a young woman from Nairobi singing to us in Swahili. Good. So all of that is good. Noting, would you please, that all of this presentation is about us building a body of people. Not only of people, but appealing to the growth of the psyche, of the soul, of the soma, the body, health, and of the social networks. The integration of healing influences, helping us all to be part of the flourishing personality and part of the flourishing environment and the flourishing community. All good. I'm almost finished, but I need to mention just a couple of things more. We also got mixed up in politics. Way back in the piece, we had Prime Minister John Gorton visit. We had Deputy Prime Minister Jim Cairns visit and speak. We had Don Chipp, who was the leader of the Democrats, wasn't he? He visited. Malcolm Fraser has visited. Bob Hawke visited. All of those people, together with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, no less, actually asked to come and visit. Sat there in the pew, received communion from me, and met with many of the people afterwards, particularly, of course, the Dutch members of the congregation. Not only do we have such visitors, but other notable participants. Justice Michael Kirby, the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, Sir Weary Dunlop, Rajana Srivastava, you've seen her on television and radio, Dr. Peter Doherty, Angela Mackenzie, her book, we've had her here, she's here tonight. And in addition to that, we've had Dr. Cunningham Dax, the head of mental health in this state for many years, Hal Hallenstein, who for many years was the state coroner, and he led one of the seminars here, Brian Burdikin, the human rights advisor to the United Nations High Commissioner, Edward de Bono was here, wearing his red socks. Yeah. And we had Elizabeth Kubler-Ross here as well. Way back, I rode on the Big Dipper in Luna Park with Dr. Kubler-Ross. Yeah, and I have a photograph to prove it. We had the 8 eminent Australians here for the Australia of Tomorrow seminar. We had visitors from 3 Lord Mayors. We've had science forums and concerts of various kinds. And we've had other visitors. Professor Avni Sali, a valued visitor. Poet Marjorie Pizer. Poet Christopher Wallace Crabb. And we had the author Morris West. I interviewed him here in church. I've introduced you to many books. I hope I have. Not only Peer Gynt, but Billy Gates Gruff, all with a great message. And I also have here other authors that I visited, just as an example in passing. Nikos Kazantzakis, you've heard me mention him many times, Report to Greco, and D.H. Lawrence. I'll come back to D.H. Lawrence in a few moments, but many poets. I introduced you to the music. Some extraordinary music. You know who it was. Gustav Mahler's music is unsurpassable, and I'm so proud that I've been able to introduce many of you to it, and some of you have been buying his music and listening to it and getting to like it. I've also introduced you to Shostakovich. Great music. Very different, but so important. The art of Edvard Munch, Caravaggio, Salvador Dali, and so on. All of that has come right into St. Michael's. So I could go on, but that's enough, almost enough anyway. I've mentioned that. I should have mentioned just one step more in terms of the properties. I was harassed several years by one eminent architect of this city, that when I'd meet him in Collins Street, as I did from time to time, he would stop me and say, "Will you come over here? You see that spire of your church? It's leaning." And I'd say, "If it's leaning, let it lean." He said, "It's going to fall down." So he pestered me for such a long time that eventually we decided we'd climb up and put a piece of chip under it and keep it in place. And so the spire is now safe, thanks to the chip that we put under it. A very costly chip, I might add. And the roof as well. The roof had to be replaced in part. We've done that. So, let me bring it together. Surprise after surprise. Isn't it something that, from the gardens to the roofing to the steps, wherever you go, we've seen them, and you've been part of it. And I've been so pleased to have you part of it. If I could read my writing on the next page, I would go on. I'm repeatedly surprised that the sunflowers in my garden at home, when I have them there, keep turning their large golden faces towards the sun. Have you noticed? And they are reminders, for me, symbols, sacraments of life's gifts, that although we can be digging around in the garden in all the depths of our terrible experiences, as you'll hear about next Sunday morning, we can look up and see the sunflower. So at the end of my time here, people keep coming from Brisbane and Bundaberg, from Broome to Wales to Woomaloo to Wagga Wagga, all that. And sometimes I jokingly say, "What took you so long?" And they surprise me by saying, "We've been following you online for years. You haven't seen us, but we've been watching you," which is a little unsettling. And our searching has been the same. Our searching has been what the Jesus Seminar people put to us years ago. In searching for the historical Jesus, we can't find him. But we go looking to say, but what was he pointing to? What was he pointing to? Can we find what it was he was pointing to? Search for that. And that's what we've been trying to do. The Jesus of faith, pointing to something beyond us. And we all search to know what it was and what it is. And one further surprise is we must bear in mind again and again that he was a person of faith, the Jewish faith. And we're part of that procession of faith. And it's enormously satisfying to me to be part of that continuity of faith. and to know that we have people here tonight. And through the course of my time here, I've been honoured to be part of people from that long tradition of faith, from the Jewish faith right through to the Christian faith, and further, I hope. So I propose, in my last months here, to have a small additional sculpture fastened into this church over here. It will stand over there to symbolize who we were and how we in our time saw the pointing finger. A small object will surprise you by its astonishing symbols that it will portray, and I hope that you'll like it. And so to finish, I'm going to read you just a little part, very little part, of D.H. Lawrence's poetry. Things people have made with wakened hands and put soft life into are awake through years with transferred touch and go on glowing for long years. And for this reason, some old things are lovely, warm still with the life of the forgotten men and women who made them. As we live, we are transmitters of life. And when we fail to transmit life, life fails to flow through us.